Why do some people seem to rise no matter where they start, while others struggle endlessly, trapped in the same financial patterns year after year? Why do two people with the same education, same job, same ambition, end up with lives that look nothing alike? Why do you feel like you're always close but never free? This book exists to answer that question, because wealth is never just about money. It's about the way you think, the way you see yourself, and what you believe you're allowed to have. You weren't born with a broken mindset. You were trained into one by your childhood, your culture, your fears, and your past. And until that mental script changes, your income won't. This isn't another book of hacks. It's not about budgeting or grinding harder. It's about finally seeing the invisible war in your head, the war between the life you want and the beliefs holding you back. And it's about winning. Let's begin. Chapter 1. You were not born poor. You were trained. You were not born afraid of money. You were not born ashamed of wanting more. Nor were you born with a belief that wealth belonged to someone else. No child enters this world with an understanding of poverty, with a concept of lack, or with guilt tied to having dreams that stretch far beyond what their parents or teachers think is possible. Those limitations were handed to you. They were taught, subtly, steadily, and often with love. But they were taught nonetheless. And before you even understood what money really meant, you had already begun shaping your life around the beliefs of others. You see, no one is born poor in mind, but many are born into environments soaked in fear, surrounded by people who had to make sacrifices just to survive, who equated struggle with virtue and comfort with danger, who warned you not to dream too big, not to reach too far, not to be too greedy, and not to ask for too much, because that's not how life works for people like us. They weren't trying to hurt you. They were trying to protect you from disappointment, from the unknown, from the cold indifference of a world that rarely rewards boldness without cost. But in doing so, they taught you to play small. They trained you to shrink your vision, to lower your woes, to temper your ambition, and to expect less from others, from the world, and worst of all, from yourself. And so, what began as a child's natural sense of worth, possibility, and bold curiosity was slowly replaced with the quiet, invisible weight of inherited scarcity. You began to internalize messages, sometimes spoken, sometimes just felt in the room. Messages like, "We can't afford that. That's for rich people. Be grateful for what you have, and don't risk what little you've got." These words didn't just inform your view of money. They wrote the code that would one day run your entire financial operating system. They turned money into something emotional, something heavy, something complicated, something that could divide people, destroy relationships, and make good people bad. And slowly, without realizing it, you stopped seeing money as a tool for freedom and began seeing it as a source of pressure, of conflict, of tension, something to avoid, to fear, or to quietly resent. And from that emotional foundation, your financial habits took root. Maybe you learned to spend quickly, to grab what you could before it disappeared, to indulge in small comforts, because big dreams never felt safe. Or maybe you became a hoarder of money, clinging tightly to every cent, never trusting that more would come, never believing that abundance could be consistent or deserved. Maybe you undercharged your value. Maybe you apologized every time you wanted something. Maybe you talked yourself out of opportunities because you didn't want to be seen as arrogant. Maybe you lowered your standards just to fit in with people who wouldn't feel threatened by your success. And maybe, without ever saying it out loud, you began to believe that staying small was the only way to stay safe. But here's the uncomfortable truth. None of that is your natural state. It's not who you are. It's who you were trained to become. You were trained by the emotional patterns of your household. You were trained by the caution in your mother's voice when she opened the bills. You were trained by the tired silence of your father, coming home from work, too exhausted to talk about dreams. You were trained by the tension during every grocery store checkout, by the way you were told no before you even asked, by the look of worry when the car made a strange noise, or when the rent came due again. And so, like most people, you became fluent in scarcity before you ever had a chance to understand wealth. You became emotionally attached to survival, and even as an adult, maybe even now, you find yourself repeating behaviors that don't make sense logically, but feel familiar emotionally. You make money, but you lose it. You get opportunities but you hesitate. You plan to start something bold but always wait for the perfect moment which never comes. You dream big when no one is looking, then shrink back into caution the moment it feels real. This is the prison most people live in, not one made of poverty, but of programming, and until that programming is exposed and rewritten, no amount of strategy will set you free. So, let's make something clear right here at the beginning. This book will not tell you to work hard. It will not tell you to hustle more, to build 1,000 side hustles, or to memorize the latest financial trend, because chances are, you've already done enough. You've put in the hours, you've watched the videos, you've read the advice, you've tried to motivate yourself out of a mental pattern that keeps pulling you back, and that's because it's not your effort that's broken, it's the foundation underneath. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your belief. And if your beliefs say money is dangerous, or I don't deserve more, or people like me don't get rich, then no matter how many opportunities come your way, you will find a way to sabotage them, or delay them, or shrink them down until they feel familiar again. That's not failure, that's identity. So many people say they want to be rich, but they're only speaking from the surface. What they really want is security, or peace, or recognition, and they believe money will give them that. But deep down, they're terrified of what wealth would mean, because it challenges everything they were taught about how the world works. To be rich, truly rich, not just in bank account but in belief, requires you to become someone new, someone whose nervous system is calm in abundance, someone who no longer needs to be liked by everyone, someone who no longer fears outgrowing their past, someone who knows that wealth is not proof of greed, but evidence of clarity, focus, and internal mastery. But you can't become that person until you confront the one you were trained to be. And that starts here. If you feel like money is always slipping through your fingers, if you feel like no matter how hard you work, you can't seem to get ahead, if you feel like you're always waiting for the right moment, the right client, the right idea, but never quite step forward, that's not laziness, that's not a lack of talent, that's a conflict between who you are and what you were taught to believe. And that's the root of everything we're going to break in this book. Because until you understand how deeply your past has shaped your psychology, until you realize how your nervous system reacts to success as if it were danger, until you see that your subconscious is still running code written when you were 8 years old, you'll keep grinding against yourself, you'll keep climbing a mountain that your own mind keeps pulling you down from, and you'll keep wondering why some people seem to fly while you keep circling the same ground. But the truth is your wings are fine, you've just been chained to a script that was never meant for you. And every chapter from here on out will be a key, not to unlock some external door, but to unlock the internal cage that's been keeping you small. You were not born poor, you were trained into poverty. And the moment you see it for what it is, just training, you reclaim the power to become something more. Now let's move forward. Let's unlearn what's been keeping you stuck. Let's rebuild your foundation from the inside out. Because once the training ends, the real wealth begins. Chapter 2. Scarcity is a liar. There is a voice that whispers to you every time you try to rise. It doesn't scream, it doesn't rage, it waits, quietly, and chooses its moment with perfect timing. Right when you're about to take the leap, right when you feel the edge of breakthrough, right when you start thinking, maybe I can do this. That's when it speaks. And what does it say? Be careful, don't lose what you already have. There might not be another chance. You don't want to be greedy. You can't afford to fail. There's not enough to go around. It sounds like wisdom. It sounds like caution. It sounds like protection. But it is scarcity. And scarcity is a liar. Scarcity is not just a lack of resources. It is a belief. A deeply rooted, highly emotional, subconscious belief that says there is never enough. Not enough money. Not enough time. Not enough chances. Not enough love, not enough for you. And so you build your life around defending what little you have. Instead of expanding into what you could become, you see opportunity, and you hesitate. You feel abundance, and you question it. You get a glimpse of success, and you brace for failure. Because scarcity has convinced you that if you take one wrong step, you'll lose everything. It has convinced you that safety comes from control, that survival is smarter than risk, that staying small is more honorable than growing tall, and that wealth is for others, for those who had better timing, better parents, better luck. Scarcity doesn't need you to be poor. It just needs you to believe that more is dangerous. Where does scarcity come from? It comes from experience, from moments where there truly wasn't enough, from memories where needs weren't met, where you felt powerless, where you had to shrink or sacrifice just to get by. Maybe you watched your parents argue about money. Maybe you lived through times where dinner was uncertain. Maybe you learned to feel guilty for asking for more, because there was barely enough to go around. And so you stopped asking, you stopped dreaming, you stopped reaching. You told yourself that being content was more mature than wanting more. You called it humility when really it was fear dressed in virtue. And then you got older. You earned your own money. You built your own path. But the belief stayed. You had more freedom, but your mind was still in check. You had more tools, but your hands still trembled at the thought of building something bigger. Because you never updated the story. You never challenged the belief that said, if I stretch too far, I will lose everything. Scarcity doesn't just rob you of wealth. It robs you of creativity, because creativity needs space. It needs faith. It needs the freedom to try, to fail, to iterate, to learn. But when you're ruled by scarcity, every decision becomes life or death. You don't invest, you hoard, you don't build, you brace, you don't move, you freeze. And eventually the fear of losing becomes greater than the hope of gaining. So you stay stuck, not because you're incapable, but because you're convinced that stretching will break you. Scarcity makes every opportunity feel like a trap, every risk feel like recklessness, every yes feel like a betrayal of safety. But the truth is, scarcity isn't truth. It's trauma. It's a learned pattern, not a permanent law. And here's what makes it so destructive. Scarcity convinces you that you're being smart. It disguises itself as maturity, as realism, as practicality. It tells you be logical, be careful, play it safe. But logic without vision is just fear in disguise. And what you call safety is often just a well-justified excuse to stay in a familiar cage. Here's the brutal irony. Scarcity doesn't protect you from loss. It guarantees it. It guarantees that you will never discover what's possible. It guarantees that you will spend your life protecting crumbs instead of baking your own bread. It guarantees that you'll watch other people rise and wonder why they had the courage to do what you never dared to try. And then it convinces you that it's too late, that you missed your chance, that you should have started earlier. And so the cycle continues, year after year, same job, same income, same anxieties, same next time, all because a lie whispered to you at just the right moment, and you listened. But if scarcity is a lie, then what is the truth? The truth is this: the world is not running out of wealth. The world is not running out of ideas. The world is not running out of opportunities. The world is not running out of money. In fact, more money is being created every second than ever in human history. Innovation is moving faster than entire generations can catch up with. New businesses, new platforms, new industries are rising from scratch every single day. People with less experience, fewer connections and less education than you are creating millions, not because they're special, but because they believed it was available. The truth is, wealth is not rare. The belief that you can have it is. And that's the war you must fight, not against the economy, not against other people, not even against your circumstances, but against the small panicked voice that says there's not enough. Because if you believe there's not enough, you'll never let yourself reach for more. And if you never reach, you'll never rise. So let me give you a powerful shift. Abundance is not something you earn, it's something you allow. It's not something out there that you have to chase down and catch. It's something in here, something inside you that you begin to trust again. You start seeing wealth, not as something rare, but as something natural. You start understanding that receiving does not make you greedy, it makes you responsible. You start realizing that the more you have, the more you can give, build, protect, and elevate. You start realizing that being rich isn't selfish, being broke on purpose is. Because when good people have money, they do good things with it. They change lives. They build systems. They create jobs. They fund futures. They bring beauty into the world that would never exist without them. So don't let scarcity disguise itself as humility. Don't let fear pretend it's responsibility. And don't let that quiet voice win. Here's your challenge. Every time you hear scarcity speak, answer back. When it says you can't afford that, respond with, how can I create the value to afford it? When it says, don't risk losing, respond with, what's the cost of staying stuck? When it says there's not enough, say clearly, there's more than enough, for me and for everyone, because when you stop protecting scarcity, you give yourself permission to start receiving abundance. And that shift, that small but revolutionary shift, is the first real step toward wealth. You weren't born thinking there wasn't enough. You were taught that. Now it's time to unlearn it. And once you do, you'll stop bracing and start building. Let's move on. Chapter 3. The Identity of Wealth. You don't become wealthy by chasing money. You become wealthy by becoming the kind of person who naturally creates, attracts, and multiplies money, not just once, but again and again, because it's who you are. Wealth is not a result, it's a reflection of your identity. And this is where most people lose the game. Before they even begin, they try to change their actions without ever addressing the person those actions are coming from. They focus on strategies, routines, and productivity hacks. But deep inside, they still see themselves as someone who is just trying to survive. They're wearing the clothes of a rich person, speaking the words of a rich person, imitating the habits of a rich person, but inside, they still identify as someone poor, struggling, small, or unworthy. And no matter how many courses they buy, no matter how much knowledge they absorb, the identity always wins. Because identity doesn't just sit in your thoughts, it lives in your nervous system. Let me explain. If you were raised to believe that success makes you a target, if you were taught that wealth will disconnect you from your community, if you learnt early that asking for more makes people uncomfortable, then you've built an entire emotional ecosystem designed to protect you from transformation. Not because you're weak, but because your mind wants to stay safe, and safety to the subconscious means familiarity. It doesn't matter that you say you want wealth, if the deeper parts of you still see yourself as the struggling one, the selfless one, the humble one, the one who never asks for too much. You will keep finding ways to shrink. You will keep finding ways to accidentally lose, to underprice your work, to second-guess your value, to delay the launch, to sabotage the breakthrough. Because the moment you begin stepping into power, your identity alarms go off. Who do you think you are? That's not just a thought, it's a defense mechanism, and it will haunt you until you decide, with full conviction, to answer it differently. So let's start here. Who do you think you are? No, really. In the quiet, when no one's watching, when no one's clapping, when you're not performing for social media or trying to impress a mentor, who do you believe yourself to be? Are you someone who gets by? Are you someone who hustles endlessly but never quite arrives? Are you someone who's destined to be stuck, overlooked, or left behind? Are you someone who helps everyone else, but always puts yourself last? Are you someone who dreams big but always comes back down? If that's the self-image running your life, then that's the financial result you will continue to recreate no matter how hard you work, or how many goals you write on your wall. And here's the truth that might shake you. Your financial life is always trying to match your identity, not your desires, not your intelligence, not your effort, your identity. So how do you change your identity? Not through positive thinking, not by forcing affirmations that you don't yet believe, but by gradually upgrading the stories you tell yourself, and then backing them with action. It begins with honesty. It begins with asking, what kind of person would I be if I truly believed I was allowed to be rich? Would I ask for what I'm worth without apology? Would I say no to low-value distractions that steal my focus? Would I invest in my learning, my health, my peace, not just once, but habitually? Would I step into rooms that intimidate me, speak with conviction, stand tall in my power, and walk away from anyone who tries to shrink me? Because that's the real test. Not how much you say you want it, but how much of your identity aligns with that future. How much of your self-image is rooted in growth, ownership, decisiveness, clarity, and vision. You can't fake identity. You can't imitate confidence. You either become it, or you orbit it forever, wondering why success keeps skipping you. The reason most people stay broke is because they build their entire life around an identity they never chose, one that was handed down to them by their parents, their culture, their pain. You don't rise by becoming someone new. You rise by stripping away everything that never belonged to you. You rise by deleting the identities that said you're too young, You're too old. You're not educated enough. You're not from the right place. You're not the kind of person who gets rich. You were never any of those things. You were always potential waiting for permission, and the permission was always yours to give. Here's what wealthy people understand. The income you generate is a direct mirror of the internal boundaries you've created around self-worth. If you believe you are valuable, you charge accordingly. If you believe your time is sacred, you stop wasting it. If you believe your mind is sharp, you begin to trust your decisions. And once that happens, money becomes a tool, not a trophy. You stop chasing status. You stop needing validation. You stop tying your worth to external applause. And from that place of centered, grounded power, wealth flows naturally, because you're no longer begging it to fill a hole inside you. You are full. You are ready. You are becoming dough. But identity isn't built in silence. It's forged in behavior. If you want to think like a rich person, act like one. Not in performance, not in pretending, but in the small, repeatable, disciplined choices that reflect power, even when no one is watching. When you decide to learn instead of scroll, you are shifting your identity. When you decide to speak up in that meeting, you are shifting your identity. When you stop explaining your value to people who don't get it, you are shifting your identity. When you invest in yourself, not because it's safe, but because you're done playing small, you are shifting your identity. It's not the big dramatic leap. It's the daily refusal to stay in a role that no longer fits. You were never meant to be ordinary. You were never designed for struggle. But struggle has a rhythm, and when you grow up inside it, you mistake it for music. You begin to find comfort in pain. You bond with people over lack. You define yourself by how much you've suffered, not how much you've risen. That's not humility. That's identity trauma. And it's time to let it go, because until you upgrade your self-image, you will always reject the success that feels too much for the old you to handle. Here's what I want you to take from this chapter. Wealth is not something you do. It's something you become. It is a reflection of the stories you believe about yourself. It is a mirror held up to your internal sense of worth. It is not the reward for suffering. It is the result of alignment. And the moment you stop asking, what do I need to do to be rich, and start asking, who do I need to become to live in abundance, everything changes. Because the identity of wealth is not something you find, it's something you choose, and it's waiting for you to claim it. Chapter 4. The Subconscious Money Script. You don't think about money the way you think you do. You believe your choices are rational, that when you save, spend, invest, or avoid, you're doing so logically, consciously, with intention. But the truth is, most of your financial decisions are emotional, and even deeper than that, they are subconscious. Long before you ever saw your first paycheck, before you ever opened a bank account, before you knew what a mortgage was or understood credit, your brain had already downloaded a script, a quiet, invisible set of beliefs that would go on to shape every dollar you touched for the rest of your life. This is your money script, the emotional software installed when you were too young to question what you were absorbing. It runs in the background, quietly determining how much you allow yourself to earn, how safe you feel with wealth, and how quickly you unconsciously get rid of what you receive. And until you rewrite that script, no strategy will save you, because the story in your mind will always overpower the plan on paper. To say, most people never question where their beliefs about money came from. They just act them out. If you grew up in a household where money was always tight, where your parents argued when the bills came in, or where you were told we can't afford that so often that it became a mantra, then your nervous system learned to associate money with stress, not freedom, not power, not peace, just tension, just survival. So even now, when you begin to accumulate more, that old script kicks in. You start to feel uncomfortable. You spend quickly. You sabotage investments. You avoid opportunities that would bring you to the next level. You call it bad luck, but it's not luck, it's programming. If you were taught that rich people are corrupt, greedy, arrogant, or out of touch, if you saw wealth presented as something to resent or fear, then you've likely internalized the idea that having more makes you less good. So you hold yourself back, not because you don't want more, but because deep down, you think becoming wealthy might make you less worthy. You see, The subconscious mind isn't driven by your goals, it's driven by your identity, and your identity is built on emotion, not logic. So how do you find your money script? Start by asking yourself uncomfortable questions, the kind that bypass your polished surface answers and reveal what you really believe. When I imagine having 10 times more money than I do right now, what do I feel? Calm or anxious? When I think about charging more for my work, do I feel empowered or guilty? Do I associate wealth with freedom or with danger, exposure and judgment? When I succeed, do I feel proud or do I worry that someone will take it away? Do I believe I must suffer in order to deserve more? These are not small questions. These are mirrors, and they reflect the root system underneath your financial life, the tangled web of stories, fears, memories, and emotional attachments that quietly guide every choice you make. Maybe your script says, I can make money but I can't keep it. So every time things go well, you brace for the fall. You blow up the relationship. You panic during a dip. You take a bad deal out of fear. You freeze in the face of risk. You play smaller than your potential. Or maybe your script says, I don't want to be a burden. So you never ask for help. You never take up space. You underprice yourself. You give too much and receive too little, then wonder why you're burnt out. Or maybe your script says, my worth is tied to how hard I work. So you grind and grind and grind, never allowing yourself to rest, never trusting that wealth can come from alignment instead of exhaustion. You feel guilty for slowing down, terrified of ease, addicted to effort, not because it brings results, but because it makes you feel like you've earned your existence. This is the trap of the subconscious. It repeats what feels familiar, not what serves you, and it will keep running the same script, year after year, until you decide to rewrite it. The mind is a master of repetition. It runs patterns automatically, not because they're useful, but because they're known. And nothing feels more threatening to the subconscious than the unknown, even if what's unknown is wealth, peace, and possibility. That's why people fear success as much as they fear failure, not because success is bad, but because it's unfamiliar. If your nervous system is calibrated for struggle, then abundance will feel unsafe. If your identity is built around being the helper, the selfless one, the survivor, then stepping into power will feel like a betrayal of who you've always been. But hear this clearly, you don't owe your past self a lifetime of limitation. You are allowed to evolve. You are allowed to become someone new. You are allowed to rewrite the script. So how do you do it? Not overnight, not by pretending, not by forcing beliefs you don't yet feel. You start gently. You start by observing your patterns, without shame, but with clarity. You ask, where do I sabotage abundance? Where do I downplay my value? Where do I delay action, out of fear? Where do I repeat the financial chaos I saw growing up? You begin to see the loop. You begin to trace them back. You begin to separate what was given to you from what you choose to keep. And then, slowly, deliberately, you install a new script, one built on trust instead of fear, one rooted in expansion, not contraction, one that tells you, over and over, until you finally believe it. I am safe in success. I am allowed to be wealthy. I can receive more, without guilt. I can build without burnout. I can rise without apology. This is not just affirmation. This is identity reconstruction. Because until you feel safe in abundance, you will always find a way to return to struggle, not consciously, but automatically, because the old script feels like home. Your subconscious is always listening. And every time you choose alignment over fear, every time you take action that stretches your comfort, every time you invest in your future despite the panic, you are teaching your subconscious a new truth, that wealth is not a threat, that more is not a betrayal, that you are not your past, that safety can exist in expansion, that your future is allowed to look nothing like your history. And over time, the script begins to change, not just in your thoughts, but in your body. You begin to relax into success. You stop sabotaging opportunity. You stop second-guessing every move. You stop chasing and start receiving. Because now, wealth doesn't just visit you, it belongs to you, because the script says so. Let this chapter be a line in the sand. No more playing out your parents' patterns. No more repeating cycles out of emotional loyalty. to people who never heal. No more living inside stories that were written before you had a say. You are the author now. You are the narrator. You decide what kind of life this becomes, and you have the power to rewrite the ending, starting today. Chapter 5. Comfort is the enemy. The greatest threat to your wealth is not failure. It's not rejection. It's not the market, or the economy, or the competition. The greatest threat is something far more subtle, far more seductive, far more disguised as a friend. It's comfort, because comfort doesn't feel like sabotage. It feels like safety. It feels like rest. It feels like you've earned it. But here's the truth that most people never realize until it's far too late. Comfort is the slow death of growth. It lulls you into stagnation. It seduces you into waiting. And it convinces you that staying where you are is the smartest decision you can make. But in reality, comfort keeps you exactly where you've always been. Stuck, uncertain, and quietly resentful of how much you know you're leaving on the table. You see, comfort doesn't knock on your door and announce itself. It creeps in through small decisions, the extra hour of scrolling, the opportunity you said no to because it made you nervous, the course you never finished, the email you didn't send, the risk you postponed for next week. And little by little, your edge dulls, your hunger softens, your urgency fades, and one day, you wake up in a life that looks eerily similar to the one you swore you'd outgrow. This is how comfort wins. Not through force, but through agreement. It doesn't need to scare you. It just needs you to stop moving. You might say, but I've worked so hard. Don't I deserve comfort? Of course you do, but not at the cost of your calling. Because here's the truth. The desire for comfort is biological. Your nervous system is designed to keep you alive, not fulfilled. It craves predictability. It wants routine. It wants to know that tomorrow will feel like today, even if today is quietly miserable. Your brain doesn't care if you're rich. It cares if you're safe. And if playing small has kept you safe, your mind will cling to it, even if it means silencing your potential, even if it means rejecting opportunities that would elevate you, even if it means saying no to the life you know, in your bones, you were meant to live. Because to your subconscious, the known hell is better than the unknown heaven. But wealth does not live in comfort. It lives in the unknown. It lives in tension. It lives in risk, in failure, in awkward conversations, in scary investments, in launching something before you're ready, in asking for more when it makes your voice shake. Wealth lives where you've never dared to go, because that's where growth lives. And you cannot grow in a place where everything feels easy. Comfort is the enemy. Because it doesn't just slow you down, it rewires your identity. You begin to settle, you begin to rationalize, you begin to convince yourself that maybe this is enough, maybe you're asking for too much, maybe other people were just luckier, smarter, better connected, and over time you forget what it felt like to be hungry, not for survival but for greatness. You forget what it felt like to be willing to risk embarrassment, in order to step into something extraordinary. And that is when your life begins to shrink, not in dramatic crashes, but in slow, invisible compromises. You tell yourself, this is fine, but fine is the language of a life that's being tolerated, not lived. You must learn to interrupt comfort. You must practice doing hard things, not because you love the pain, but because you love the freedom it creates. You must wake yourself up, again and again, because the world will not do it for you. No one will drag you out of mediocrity. No one will knock on your door and hand you your dream. No one will force you to become the person you were meant to be. That's your job. And the longer you delay it, the heavier the price. Because what comfort gives you in the short term, rest, ease, relief, it steals tenfold in the long run. It steals your edge. It steals your confidence. It steals your connection to the future version of yourself, who is already living the life you keep putting off. There is no version of your dream life that doesn't require discomfort. No, there is no rich, powerful, peaceful, deeply fulfilled version of you, who didn't have to walk through fear, rejection, failure, criticism, loneliness, and deep uncertainty to get there. So the question is not, how do I avoid discomfort? The question is, how do I build a life where I am strong enough to hold it? That's the real wealth, the ability to stay present in uncertainty. The ability to act despite fear, the ability to move when your legs are shaking, the ability to keep going when no one is clapping. Because every time you choose growth over comfort, you're building emotional equity, the kind of internal wealth that no recession can touch, no algorithm can suppress, no external validation can inflate or destroy, and that's the kind of wealth that lasts. Now let's be clear, rest is not the enemy, recovery is sacred, burnout is not a badge of honor, hustle without direction is just glorified avoidance. But there's a difference between rest and retreat. There's a difference between pausing to refuel and quitting because the path got hard. There's a difference between self-care and self-sabotage dressed up as self-love. And if you want to be rich, not just in money, but in discipline, in clarity, in energy, you must know that different. Here's a truth most people avoid. You will never feel like doing the thing that changes your life. You will never feel fully ready. You will never feel perfectly aligned. There will always be a reason to wait, a reason to slow down, a reason to say, not now. And if you keep obeying comfort, you will keep becoming someone who watches life instead of leading it, someone who scrolls instead of speaks, someone who claps for others instead of claiming their own win, someone who used to dream, but now justify. And that is not who you came here to be. So what's the alternative? You make a vow, quietly internally, but fully. A vow that says, I will no longer live my life at the mercy of comfort. I will no longer mistake safety for success. I will no longer let the fear of failure keep me from becoming someone who can handle greatness. I will stop waiting to feel ready, and I will move anyway, because nothing will ever feel more alive than choosing the harder path that leads to your truth. And nothing will ever feel more dead than looking back on your life and realizing you avoided discomfort so well, you missed everything that could have made it meaningful. Let this be the chapter where something breaks, something heavy, something old, something safe. Let this be the moment where comfort loses its grip on you, because the version of you, who has everything you say you want, more freedom, more peace, more power, more money, does not live on the other side of more comfort. That version lives on the other side of resistance. And every time you walk through it, you're not just moving toward wealth, you are becoming it. Chapter 6. The Dopamine Trap. Every day, from the moment you wake up, your brain begins looking for one thing. Not success, not purpose, not meaning. Dopamine. It's the most seductive chemical your brain knows. It's not happiness. It's not peace. It's not even pleasure. It's the anticipation of pleasure, the pull, the craving, the itch. It's the hit you get when you check your phone, refresh your notifications, scroll one more time, swipe again, check your bank account, check your likes, check your inbox. You think you're managing your time, but what you're really managing is your dopamine, and until you learn to control it, it will quietly destroy your ability to build wealth. Because wealth requires long-term focus. It requires patience. It requires the ability to delay gratification, to resist distraction, to work in silence, while the world screams for your attention. And dopamine, left unregulated, makes that impossible. We live in a world designed to make you poor in attention. And when your attention is poor, your wealth soon follows. Because the same brain that can't go 20 minutes without checking a screen is the brain you're trying to use to build a long-term vision. The same brain that's addicted to constant novelty is the brain you're asking to finish a project, write the offer, build the system, or stay focused when the feedback isn't instant. But here's the problem. Wealth isn't instant. Impact isn't instant. Mastery isn't instant. Everything worth having takes longer than your dopamine wants it to. And if you've trained your mind to only pursue what feels good now, you'll never have the strength to stick with what pays off later. The dopamine trap is brutal because it feels harmless. It feels like just one more scroll, just a quick check, just a small break. But those small breaks are slowly breaking your edge. The edge you need to stand out, to lead, to create, to finish what you start. And worst of all, you begin to think that you're the problem. You think you're lazy. You think you lack discipline. You think you're not wired for success. But in reality, your brain is just flooded, overfed with cheap stimulation, and undernourished in meaning. Because you're not lazy, you're just overstimulated and underfocused, and no one ever taught you how to take your attention back. Let's get brutally honest. Most people will never build wealth. not because they aren't smart or talented, but because they are chemically addicted to distraction. They can't sit with boredom. They can't sit with discomfort. They can't sit in silence long enough for deep work to take place. They want results without routine. They want the outcome without the tension. They want growth without the stretch. And so they choose ease every time. They choose the notification over the note. They choose the app over the discipline. They choose the comfort of passive consumption over the cost of active creation. And they call it rest. But it's not rest. It's avoidance. It's short-term dopamine winning over long-term wealth. Dopamine is not the enemy. It's a powerful tool. It's what drives you to chase, to pursue, to build. But when it's hijacked by algorithms, apps, and instant gratification, it becomes your captor, not your ally. And until you reset your brain's relationship with it, you will keep abandoning the very things that would change your life, because anything meaningful takes longer than your addiction allows. Building a business is boring. Writing a book is boring. Mastering a craft is boring. Getting wealthy is boring. It's repetition. It's silence. It's doing the work when no one is clapping. It's moving forward when no one is watching. It's resisting every shiny shortcut in favor of the dull, consistent execution that actually moves the needle. And if your mind is wired for entertainment, you will sabotage every path to wealth that doesn't reward you instant. So what's the fix? You don't need to give up technology. You don't need to move into the mountains or throw away your phone, but you do need to train your brain again. You need to reclaim your attention like your life depends on it, because it does. You need to break the cycle of instant relief and replace it with deep engagement. You need to build dopamine discipline, the ability to resist the immediate in favor of the ultimate, and it starts small. You start by doing boring things on purpose. Yes, on purpose. You sit in silence. You go on a walk without music. You write without checking notifications. You create before you consume. You stop rewarding your brain for chasing novelty and start feeding it the kind of focus that builds something real. Because focus, not talent, is the rarest currency in the modern world. And the people who win are not the smartest. They're the ones who can sit with tension without reaching for a fix. You must become someone who finds joy in discipline, who finds power in patience, who trains their body and mind to work long after the thrill wears off, who becomes less addicted to achievement and more addicted to consistency. That's how you outlast. That's how you win. Because wealth doesn't come to the most excited. It comes to the most consistent. The world is not short on ideas. It is short on finish. People who keep showing up long after the dopamine is gone. If you're listening to this and feeling called out, good. It means you're waking up. It means you're noticing the pattern. It means the fog is lifting, and you're finally seeing the subtle, invisible ways your life has been run by a chemical that only cares about the next hit. But now you're choosing something deeper. Now you're choosing to delay pleasure, not forever, but long enough for something more permanent to emerge. Now you're choosing to build a life that's driven by vision, not by the next spike in your brain's reward system. Now you're choosing peace over panic, mastery over noise, depth over dopamine. And that choice made every day will make you rich. You will know you've escaped the dopamine trap when you no longer panic in stillness, when you can sit with your thoughts and feel present, not rest, when you can work for hours on something meaningful without checking your phone every 5 minutes, when you can walk away from short-term pleasure, not out of punishment, but out of power, because that's real freedom, and that's the kind of freedom that doesn't just lead to wealth, it is wealth. Chapter 7. Shame and Spending. There's something money does that few people ever talk about openly. It exposes you. It reveals what you're hiding. It brings forward what you haven't healed. Because how you spend is not just a financial behavior, it's an emotional language. Every dollar you move is saying something about what you believe, what you're avoiding, and what you're trying to prove or numb. And if you've ever found yourself spending money on things you didn't need, buying things for people who didn't care, or throwing your cash at comfort because you didn't feel in control, then you already know this. Spending is often not about money at all. It's about shame. Shame is silent. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't shout. It lingers in the corners of your decisions, disguised as guilt, as fear, as the quiet urge to fix something inside you by buying something outside you. You spend because you feel behind. You spend because you feel small. You spend because you feel like you need to prove that you're okay, that you're valuable, that you belong. But no amount of clothes, gadgets, trips, status, or flexes can fix what shame has broken, because shame doesn't live in your bank account. It lives in your identity. Maybe no one ever taught you to see money as a tool, so you started seeing it as a drug. You used it to soothe. You used it to distract. You used it to fill the space where self-worth was supposed to live. And every time the discomfort rose up, the anxiety, the emptiness, the comparison, you reached for your wallet like it was a painkiller, because it worked. For a moment, for a few hours, maybe even days, you felt in control again. You felt seen. You felt elevated, until the guilt came back, the regret, the shame, and the cycle repeated. Quiet, hidden, unspoken. You called it retail therapy, but it was really just emotional bleeding. And the more you bled, the more you needed to spend, not to thrive, but to survive. This is the reality no one posts on Instagram. This is the truth behind the lifestyle most people are imitating. A quiet desperation to look rich because they feel poor inside. And the problem is, the performance is addictive. Once you start using money to create a sense of value, it becomes very hard to stop, even when it's destroying your peace. You don't just spend for yourself. You spend to manage how other people see you. You spend to avoid the hard work of rebuilding your identity. You spend because you've attached your self-worth to the way your life appears, not the way it feels. And deep down there's a fear that if you stop performing, no one will value you. That if you stop flexing, no one will notice you. That if you stop spending, you'll be exposed for what you've been trying to hide. But what you're hiding isn't failure, it's shame. And shame is a liar. Shame says you're not good enough, so you buy to feel better. Shame says you're falling behind, so you spend to catch up. Shame says you're not lovable as you are, so you purchase attention, affection, applause. And slowly, your money stops being a tool and becomes a cage. You're not buying freedom, you're buying permission to feel okay for a few hours at a time. But here's the thing, shame cannot be healed with things. It can only be healed with truth. You have to stop running. You have to stop hiding behind your bank balance, your outfit, your car, your phone, your vacation photo. You have to stop letting spending be the stand-in for the self-worth you've never been taught to build from the inside. Because when your money is being controlled by shame, it will always leave your hands faster than you can hold it. Not because you're undisciplined, but because your heart is wounded. And until the wound is addressed, the behavior won't change. So let's slow down for a moment and ask the deeper question. What are you really trying to buy? Validation, relief, revenge, forgiveness? Are you spending to prove something to people who aren't watching anymore? Are you trying to show your parents you made it? Are you trying to get back at the world for overlooking you? Are you trying to make the pain feel more glamorous than it is? Be honest, not to judge, but to understand, because only when you tell the truth can you begin to change. As seen, if your spending is rooted in shame, then saving will feel like starvation, discipline will feel like punishment, saying no will feel like self-rejection, you'll resent your budget, you'll sabotage your plan, you'll call yourself a failure when really, you're just following emotional instructions that were written during your lowest moments. But you can change that. You can sit with the discomfort instead of covering it. You can build self-worth that doesn't depend on image. You can learn to hold success without constantly trying to spend your way back to emotional neutrality. Because the moment you stop using money to fix your shame, you begin using it to build your freedom. So how do you begin healing the pattern? You start by separating who you are from what you have. You remind yourself, daily if you must, that money is not proof of worth, that your value doesn't fluctuate with your income, that abundance flows to those who feel worthy to hold it, not those who beg it to cover their wound. You begin choosing purchases with intention, not emotion. You ask, every time you want to spend, am I buying peace or escaping discomfort? Am I choosing expansion or avoiding a feeling? Am I expressing who I am or trying to compensate for who I'm afraid I'm not? You create space between desire and decision. You pause, you reflect, you breathe. You begin to see the pattern instead of becoming it. And slowly, the shame loses its grip. See, you are not broken because you've made poor financial choices. You are human. You've felt pain, pressure, longing, loneliness, and you've used the tools you had, but now you have better tools. Now you have awareness. Now you have a choice. You can decide, right here, right now, to stop spending from scarcity, to stop spending from guilt, to stop spending from the need to prove something. You can decide to build wealth from wholeness, not compensation, because when you spend from a place of power, your money builds your life. But when you spend from shame, your money becomes a mirror, reflecting all the parts of you that still don't feel like enough, and you are enough. Let this chapter be a turning point. Let this be the moment where your money becomes an expression of your truth, not a mask for your pain. Let this be the beginning of a new relationship with wealth, one rooted in clarity, intention, and emotional freedom, because wealth is not just how much you earn, it's how cleanly you earn it, how calmly you hold it, and how consciously you choose what it means. Shame has no place in that story. Let it go. Chapter 8. Desire without direction. Almost everyone wants to be rich. They'll say it easily, loudly, boldly. They want freedom, luxury, power, peace. They want to travel when they want, give without thinking, never worry about bills again. They want to retire their parents, build a dream home, leave a legacy. They want more, but wanting more doesn't build wealth, because desire without direction is just noise, loud, chaotic, exciting, but powerless. Desire is the spark, but direction is the path. And without a path, desire turns into frustration. It becomes a loop, a cycle of dreaming, delaying, doubting, and abandoning. And eventually that once bright flame of possibility dims into a quiet, bitter whisper. Maybe I'm just not the kind of person who makes it. Desire alone is emotional. It's reactive. It's driven by mood, not by mission. You want something today, a new life, a big shift, a breakthrough, but tomorrow you're back in old routines, telling yourself you'll get serious next week. You don't need more desire, you need direction, a clear, committed, unshakable direction, one that doesn't crumble under distraction, one that doesn't flinch in the face of fear, one that can weather confusion, fatigue, and boredom, because those things are inevitable, and the dream must be strong enough to survive them. The world is full of smart, capable people with powerful desires and no direction. They wake up with ambition and fall asleep with regret, not because they aren't working hard, but because they're not working on the right things, in the right order, for the right reason. They chase income without impact. They copy tactics they don't understand. They start projects they never finish. They make money then spend it before it means anything. And it's not because they're lazy, it's because their effort is scattered. And scattered effort leads to scattered result. You must understand something. The mind without direction becomes your enemy. It starts creating distractions. It starts chasing pleasure. It starts attaching to small goals that feel productive but lead nowhere. You make a little money, and then reward yourself instead of reinvesting. You launch a product, and then scroll for 3 days instead of optimizing. You get momentum, and then abandon it, because the next shiny thing looks more fun. Why? Because your identity is still attached to desire, not direction. You enjoy the feeling of wanting more, but you haven't committed to becoming the kind of person who builds more, and that gap is killing your progress. So what does direction look like? It's not just a goal. It's not just a to-do list. Direction is a decision, a daily decision to move forward no matter how you feel. It's choosing the long road over the short dopamine hit. It's building when no one is clapping. It's working when no one is watching. It's being accountable to a future version of yourself, who is counting on you to not flinch. It's creating a life that bends around your vision, not your mood, because moods pass, but direction remains. And if you want to be rich, not just wealthy on paper, but truly empowered in mind and behavior, you need direction so clear, so locked in, that nothing can steal your focus from it. There's a question that separates the dreamers from the builder, and it's this: can you do the boring things that create an exciting life? Can you wake up and repeat the process, refine the system, write the next line, build the next offer, send the next email, record the next video, make the next call, without needing it to feel magical? Because direction isn't glamorous. It's often lonely. It's repetitive. It's built in quiet, invisible spaces, far from the applause and far from the validation. But the life it creates, that life is rare, and that life is reserved for those who traded constant stimulation for focused commitment. Too many people confuse excitement for purpose. They wait to feel aligned, they wait to feel ready, they wait for a burst of motivation. But the wealthiest people in the world don't wait. They build clarity through motion. They don't expect to feel certain before they act. They act, and clarity reveals itself along the way. That's the power of direction. It doesn't require you to know everything. It only requires you to move forward consistently, to stop abandoning yourself every time it gets uncomfortable, to stop switching paths every time one feels slow, because what you're really running from isn't failure. It's the discipline required to grow. That lie, let me ask you, where is your energy going? Is it going into a focused process that's designed to compound over time, or is it being scattered into side projects, half-finished plans, and emotional spending that makes you feel momentarily successful, but leaves you further from your actual goal? If your direction isn't clear, your life becomes noise, and you begin to drown in the very energy you once called ambition. But the moment you commit to a path, not a perfect path, just a true one, everything begins to sharpen. Distractions lose their power, confusion begins to lift, your work gains weight, your time gains gravity, and for the first time, the dream stops floating above you like a fantasy, and begins to take shape beneath your feet. The truth is, most people don't fail because they lack potential. They fail because they never learned how to direct it. They were given desire without discipline, ideas without process, hope without habits, and so they burn out, not because they tried too hard, but because they never finished what they started. They got good at beginnings, they got addicted to fresh start, but they never built a relationship with the middle, the part where nothing is glamorous, but everything is built. Direction means staying in the middle long enough for compounding to do its work. It means believing in the plan when the results are still quiet, and it means knowing that you are capable of more, but only if you stop abandoning the process that reveals it. So if you're listening to this and feeling tired of false starts, tired of chasing new ideas, tired of trying to feel ready before moving, let this be the moment that ends. You don't need another spark. You need a fire that burns quietly, daily beneath your surface, steady and unshakable. You need to stop building castles in your mind and start laying bricks with your hand. One system, one product, one message, one path, repeated, refined, scaled, delivered. You don't need more passion, you need more precision. And once you move with precision, your life will begin to align, not because of luck, but because you finally gave your energy something to build. Desire is loud, but direction is quiet power, and those who walk in quiet power are the ones who last, the ones who compound, the ones who rise. Let today be the day your life stops drifting. Let today be the day you pick a direction and refuse to flinch, because wealth doesn't come to those who want, it comes to those who move with intention and never stop walking. Chapter 9. Your environment is a mirror. Look around you. Everything in your life right now, your routines, your energy, your mindset, your habits, your income, your confidence, is a reflection of something deeper, not of your goals, not of your dreams, but of your environment. Because no matter how strong your willpower is, no matter how determined your spirit, no matter how big your vision, you are always consciously or unconsciously shaped by the space you live in, the people you speak to, the energy you absorb, and the patterns you repeat. Your environment is not neutral. It is constantly training you, constantly influencing you, constantly mirroring back who you are or who you're becoming. And if you want to build wealth, real wealth, the kind that starts in your mind and moves outward into your systems, habits and results, you must first take full ownership of the environment you're allowing yourself to stay inside. Environment isn't just your home. It's not just your city or your job or your desk. Environment is everything that surrounds your identity. It's the conversations you tolerate. It's the content you consume. It's the language your friends use. It's the energy you feel when you walk into your bedroom. It's the expectations of the people around you. It's the beliefs that echo in the air, sometimes spoken, often unspoken, that silently tell you what's possible here and what is. And when you're in an environment where small thinking is the norm, where mediocrity is celebrated, where success is envied but never supported, you begin to shrink, you begin to hold back your ideas, you begin to lower your standards, you begin to apologize for ambition, you begin to sabotage your growth, not because you're broken, but because you're trying to belong. And for most people, the desire to belong will override the desire to build. Think about this. You spend hours every week hearing other people's beliefs, absorbing other people's attitudes, watching other people's behaviors. Do those people speak life into your goals, or doubt? Do they energize you, or drain you? Do they challenge you or validate your excuses? If you're surrounded by people who constantly joke about being broke, complain about the economy, fear every change, avoid responsibility, and resent the wealthy, it doesn't matter how smart you are. Eventually you will begin to reflect that energy, not because you agree with it, but because it becomes familiar. And the brain craves familiarity more than it craves truth. We are social creatures. You become who you are around. Your baseline adapts to match the group. So if your environment is filled with people who make excuses, stay stuck, and glorify struggle, then your nervous system will begin to interpret ambition as threatening, not intellectually but emotionally. You'll start second-guessing yourself. You'll feel guilty for rising. You'll slow down to match their pace, not because they asked you to, but because you want to stay close. You want connection, and connection often requires compromise. So you compromise, not your dream, just a little bit of momentum here, a little bit of courage there. You turn the volume down on your vision, so you can still hear the people around you. And soon, you wonder why your motivation has faded, why your results have plateaued, why your fire has gone dim. It's not you, it's the room you're in. If you want to change your life, change your environment. Not eventually, now. Create distance between you and the noise. You don't have to cut everyone off. You don't have to be cold or cruel or self-righteous. But you do have to be honest about what energy belongs in the room with your future. Because you can't grow in a space where your dreams feel like threats. You can't evolve in a place where everyone's pretending they don't want more. You can't become who you're meant to be while staying emotionally loyal to the version of you they're comfortable with. That version has to die, not to hurt them, but to honor you. Now, environment isn't just about people, it's about what you allow yourself to be immersed in every day. What do you see when you open your phone? Who's speaking into your mind when you scroll? What music are you feeding your soul with? What stories are you telling yourself over and over? Because if your mental space is flooded with negativity, fear, controversy, chaos, even if it's just entertainment, you're absorbing it. You're training your nervous system to associate money, power, success with anxiety, distrust, and overstimulation. And slowly your focus becomes fractured. You stop thinking strategically. You start reacting emotionally. You lose the clarity required to execute at a high level. This is the cost of living inside environments that weren't designed for your expansion. And unless you rebuild your world, not just physically but digitally, emotionally, spiritually, you'll never fully escape the identity they've been shaping for you. Let's go deep. Some people hold themselves back not because of their current environment, but because of the past ones they still carry. Old stories, old shames, old voices. You still hear your teacher saying you're not smart enough. You still hear your parents saying we can't afford that. You still carry the silence of a childhood where wealth meant conflict, or secrecy, or pressure. And even though the physical environment has changed, the emotional echo remains. You're free but you don't feel free. You're safe, but your nervous system still expects pain. You're capable, but your inner voice still questions everything you build. That's what happens when your environment lives inside you, long after you've left it. So how do you change this? You do it consciously, you do it fiercely, you do it daily. You begin by curating your world. You redesign your space, you clean your surroundings, you declutter your distractions, you remove what no longer reflects who you are becoming. You create digital boundaries, you unsubscribe, you unfollow, you stop consuming energy that contradicts your future. You begin speaking different words, even if they feel foreign at first. You speak abundance, you speak clarity, you speak possibility, and you seek out people, real or virtual, who elevate your standard. not your comfort, because you will always rise or fall to the expectation of your environment. There will be a moment, maybe many, where this feels lonely, because growth is not always loud. Sometimes it means walking alone. Sometimes it means becoming a different person in a room full of people still clinging to the past. Sometimes it means disappointing those who only loved you when you were struggling, and that's hard, but it's worth it, because the cost of staying where you are is far greater than the discomfort of leaving. You are not here to be liked by everyone. You are here to become everything God planted inside you, and that cannot happen in an environment that keeps asking you to stay small. Let this be the chapter where you stop apologizing for evolving. Let this be the moment where you realize you were never crazy, or selfish, or unrealistic. You were just in the wrong room, and now, you're building a new one. Chapter 10. Mental Leverage. There are people who work harder than you, longer than you, more painfully than you, and yet they will never build wealth. Not because they're lazy, not because they're unworthy, but because they don't understand leverage. They are still trapped in the oldest financial lie in existence. Work more hours to earn more money. They believe that effort equals income, that time equals value, that sweat equals success. And so they grind, endlessly, tirelessly, but they never build momentum, because they are moving forward with a broken model. Wealth is not a result of effort, it is a result of leverage. And leverage does not come from doing more, it comes from thinking differently. Mental leverage is the richest currency on earth, because it multiplies everything: your time, your influence, your impact, your income. It allows 1 hour of focus to create 10 hours of results. It allows one decision to create 10 years of freedom. It allows one idea to echo for decades. And the difference between the rich and the poor is not just money, it's the ability to see leverage where others only see labor. Most people think in terms of linear input. They trade time for money. They clock in, clock out, repeat. They build with their hands, not with their mind. They don't look for systems, they look for security. They don't seek scale, they seek survival. But the wealthy don't think that way. They look at the same problem and ask, how do I build something that keeps working when I stop? How do I create once and earn forever? How do I make this system smarter than I am? That's leverage. And once you learn to think like this, you will never again settle for effort without multiplication. Leverage can take many forms. It can be technology, building something once that works for thousands. It can be people hiring, delegating, partnering with others, whose time multiplies yours. It can be systems, automating what you once did manually. It can be money, investing so that your capital grows without your presence. But before any of that, leverage begins in the mind. It begins by asking a simple but rare question. Is this the highest use of my time? And if it isn't, you pause, you step back, you zoom out, you refuse to keep pouring your life into tasks that only reward you once. Let me give you an example. Most people spend their days solving the same problems repeatedly, answering the same emails, fixing the same bottlenecks, making the same decisions, fighting the same fire. They do this for years, never stopping to ask, why am I solving the same problem 10 times, instead of solving it once, and never again? That's the difference between effort and leverage. Effort says, keep fixing it. Leverage says, design it better. Effort says, work harder. Leverage says, work smarter, then never touch it again. Effort builds walls. Leverage builds engines. And engines don't get tired. If you want to get rich, you need to become obsessed with multiplication. You need to stop asking, what do I do next? And start asking, what system can I build so this does itself next time? You need to stop chasing short wins and start building long game. You need to build mental infrastructure, decision frameworks, priority filters, productivity loops that reduce how much you have to think, decide, and repeat. Because every ounce of energy you spend on low leverage tasks is energy stolen from your future wealth. Now, this doesn't mean you never work hard. It means you work hard on the right things. You trade short-term intensity for long-term clarity. You suffer once to build the system that prevents 1,000 small suffering. You invest more energy up front, so that your future self can operate in freedom, not friction. This is the secret most people miss. Wealth is built in the thinking room, not just the doing room, and the people who rise aren't always the busiest. They're the clearest. They spend more time designing the game than playing it. But here's the catch. Thinking in leverage requires emotional maturity. It requires that you stop chasing dopamine and start chasing debt. It requires that you resist the thrill of immediate rewards and focus on the satisfaction of long-term systems. It requires you to look at a task and say, I could do this in 5 minutes, or I could build something that does it in 5 seconds forever. And that feels slow at first. It feels unnecessary. It feels like you're falling behind. But eventually the compound effect kicks in, and the people who played for efficiency start passing the people who played for speed. Because leverage is exponential, and effort is linear. Let me be direct. If your income depends entirely on your presence, then your freedom is an illusion. If you stop working and your life begins to collapse, you don't have leverage. You have a job even if you call it a business. You have a trap, even if you're proud of your hustle. And no matter how passionate you are about your craft, if you can't scale it, protect it, and free yourself from it, you're not building wealth, you're building dependence. So ask yourself, where am I doing what could be automated? Where am I solving the same problem twice? Where am I choosing comfort over creativity? Where am I trading time for money instead of value for scale? These are the questions that free you, not motivational slogans, but operational truths. Mental leverage is not just about business, it's about life. It's about learning how to filter your decisions, so you're not drowning in options. It's about creating emotional systems, routines that regulate you, calm you, focus you. It's about building relationships that multiply peace instead of stealing. It's about designing a reality where your life works even when you take your hands off the wheel. Because wealth is not control, wealth is freedom from control, and freedom comes from the ability to step away without falling behind. So if you're tired of grinding, if you feel stuck in cycles that reward you once but cost you always, if you know you're meant to build something bigger than your own hands can carry, it's time to stop building faster and start building smarter. Start asking better questions. Start creating better systems. Start designing a life that supports your wealth, not one that drains it. Because the richest people in the world aren't working harder than you. They're just playing a different game. And now, so are you. Chapter 11. Emotional risk tolerance. The biggest risks in life are not the ones that cost you money. They're the ones that cost you peace, clarity, trust in yourself. Because the real danger isn't failure. The real danger is what your mind does with it. You see, most people don't lose because they took too many risks. They lose because they never learned how to handle the emotional weight of uncertainty. They collapse under fear. They freeze at the edge of growth. They don't trust themselves to leap, not because they lack talent, but because they've never been taught how to feel unsafe without panicking. And that's the skill that separates the wealthy from the rest. The rich don't avoid risk. They tolerate it. They train for it. They learn to stay calm in chaos. They become emotionally fluent in uncertainty. Because in the world of wealth, risk is not the enemy. It's the cost of entry. When you were growing up, you were taught to fear failure, to avoid embarrassment, to stay close to the familiar, to play it safe, to follow the rules, to seek security. And so, when the time came to rise, to pivot, to launch, to invest, to speak, to lead, your body recoiled, your palms sweat, your heart raced, your stomach twisted, and instead of moving through it, you stopped. You told yourself, not yet. You called it wisdom, you called it timing, but really, it was just fear wearing a mask. Because no one ever taught you how to sit in risk without letting it eat you alive. Risk is not the problem. Your emotional reaction to risk is. Risk doesn't destroy people. Panic does. Because when you panic, you shrink. You start playing to avoid loss, instead of playing to win. You say yes to bad deals, just to feel safe again. You say no to great opportunities, because your nervous system is still stuck in old trauma. You don't move because you're under threat, not from the world, but from your own unregulated fear. And unless you train your emotional system to recognize risk as a signal, not a stop sign, you will keep mistaking every challenge as danger and calling it wisdom to walk away. Emotional risk tolerance is the single most important skill for building wealth, because every level you ascend will require more of it. The first time you ask for more money, the first time you pitch yourself publicly, the first time you invest in a coach, a program, a tool, or a team, the first time you put your name on something that might fail, the first time you walk into a room full of people who are more successful than you, every moment of growth will feel like a threat. And if you don't know how to manage those sensations, not suppress them, not ignore them, but navigate them, you'll retreat back to safety again and again, and call it being realistic. But it's not realism, it's untrained emotion. So how do you increase your emotional risk tolerance? You start by changing your relationship with fear. You stop treating fear like a red light. You start seeing it as a compass, one that points directly at what needs to be healed, challenged, and strengthened. You realize that fear is not a message to stop. It's a message that something important is on the line. And instead of trying to kill the fear, you learn to breathe through it. You learn to stay in motion, even when your mind is screaming. You learn to stretch your nervous system, gently but consistently, by doing things that scare you without destroying you. Because every time you step forward while afraid, your tolerance grows. You don't build risk tolerance by thinking about it. You build it by training your body to hold more pressure without shutting down. That means leaning into discomfort. It means saying yes to things before you feel ready. It means taking action before certainty appears. It means making peace with rejection, embarrassment, and imperfect outcomes. And it means trusting that who you are becoming is worth the temporary cost of being misunderstood, doubted, or afraid. Because the version of you who is rich, clear, powerful, generous, that version didn't get there by avoiding risk. That version walked through it, again and again, until fear stopped being a wall and started being a doorway. There's a reason most people stay stuck in the middle. It's not that they don't have dreams. It's that they've been trained to wait until they feel safe before moving. But wealth doesn't wait for comfort. It shows up for those who can act without a guarantee, who can make decisions without applause, who can carry themselves with power even when the outcome is unknown. Because the truth is, it's always unknown. You never really know if something will work. You never really know if people will say yes. You never really know if this is the move that changes everything. And that's okay, because wealth isn't about knowing, it's about moving anyway. Let me ask you something. What would you do this week if you weren't afraid? What conversation would you start? What offer would you make? What investment would you commit to? What truth would you finally speak? Now let me ask you this. Why are you letting fear make financial decisions for you? Why are you letting an emotion, temporary, irrational, volatile, shape your entire relationship with the future? Because unless you interrupt this pattern, it will control you for life. Not loudly, not violently, but quietly, in the form of doubt, in the form of someday, in the form of never quite arriving. And that kind of loss doesn't happen all at once. It happens over time, as you trade possibility for comfort, one excuse at a time. That's it. This chapter isn't here to make you fearless. Fear is normal. Fear is part of the process. But the rich learn how to keep building, even with shaking hands. They don't wait to feel ready. They don't outsource their courage. They don't confuse doubt with danger. They trust themselves to act with wisdom, not because it's safe, but because they've trained their emotions to follow vision, not panic. And now, so can you build what you've been postponing. Invest in what makes you uncomfortable, not recklessly, but boldly. And remind yourself, the ability to hold risk is the ability to hold wealth. Because wealth isn't built by the calm, it's built by the courageous. And you are ready now, even if it doesn't feel like it yet. Chapter 12. The addiction to looking rich. There is a silent addiction that's taken hold of the modern world. One that doesn't ruin your health, but ruins your wealth. One that doesn't leave bruises on your skin, but leaves fractures in your future. One that doesn't empty your heart, but empties your bank account, your energy, your momentum. It is the addiction to looking rich. We live in an age where appearance is currency, where clout is mistaken for capital, where likes are mistaken for legacy, where what you wear, drive, post, or flaunt has become more important than what you own, build, or preserve. And in this illusion, we have traded real power for performance. We have confused validation with value, and we have built entire lives, fragile, loud, expensive lives, around the desperate need to look successful long before we are. Looking rich is easy. You can finance it, you can fake it, you can filter it, you can wear a luxury brand and still be drowning in credit card debt. You can post vacation photos and still be bankrupt in peace. You can talk big numbers and still have no freedom, because looking rich is not about ownership. It's about optics, and optics are cheap. You can buy the illusion of success, but you can't buy the psychology of it. And that's what this book is about, because the people who chase appearance almost never build true wealth. They're too busy performing to plan, too busy flexing to focus, too busy impressing to build anything that lasts. Let me be clear, there is nothing wrong with enjoying beautiful things. There is nothing wrong with luxury, with elegance, with aesthetics, with fine taste. But there is everything wrong with needing those things to feel whole. When your self-worth depends on the car you drive, the watch you wear, or the way strangers react to your photos, you're not building wealth, you're renting identity. And eventually, the cost of that performance will bankrupt you, emotionally and financially. Why do so many people fall into this trap? Because most people were never taught how to feel valuable without being seen. They never learned how to sit in silence and still know their worth. They never learned how to work in obscurity without shrinking. They never learned how to build slowly without losing confidence. So instead of building their character, they curate their image. They reach for applause before mastery. They post their goals before they've even begun. And deep down, they're hoping that the world's reaction will give them the courage they haven't learned to generate from within. But it doesn't, because external validation is a loan, and it always demands more interest than you can afford. Here's the truth no one wants to say, and the people who look rich often aren't, and the people who are rich often don't need to look it. Why? Because real wealth is internal first. It's a mindset, it's a nervous system, it's a relationship with self, with time, with value. Real wealth doesn't need to be seen. It doesn't need to prove itself. It doesn't need applause. And because of that, it becomes exponentially easier to build, quietly, consistently, strategically. The rich understand that the first priority is freedom, not flash. Because when you build freedom first, you can buy anything. But when you buy everything first, you sacrifice freedom forever. So let me ask you, are you building for Instagram, or are you building for impact? Are you working to impress people, or to escape the cycle of performing? Are you buying things to feel rich, or are you actually becoming someone who no longer needs to? There's a difference, and that difference will determine whether your success is real or renting. Looking rich is reactive. It's based on insecurity. It's driven by comparison. It says, I need the world to see me, so I can believe in myself. But being rich is proactive. It's based on internal alignment. It's driven by purpose. It says, I already know who I am, so I don't need to prove anything to anyone. When you reach that point, when you no longer need the flex, the post, the costume, you become dangerous, because you're no longer wasting energy curating an illusion. You're using that energy to build infrastructure. You're creating things that don't need likes to succeed. You're building systems that generate wealth, even when no one is watching. You're focused, and focus compounds, and compounding, not clout, is what makes people wealthy. You must ask yourself, urgently and honestly, What part of my financial life is still a performance? What purchases are being made to impress instead of progress? What goals are based on looking like I've arrived instead of doing the real work to arrive? What decisions are being shaped by fear of not being seen? Because every time you spend to be seen, you pay with more than dollars. You pay with your future. You pay with your discipline. You pay with your peace. And no luxury item is worth the price of living a life that doesn't actually feel rich. This chapter is an invitation to return to substance over appearance, to strip away the image, to stop buying approval, to stop wearing costumes to feel important, to stop letting validation determine your value. You don't need the car, you need clarity. You don't need the shoes, you need systems. You don't need the flex, you need freedom. And once you prioritize freedom, the rest becomes optional, not required for your self-esteem, but available as a celebration of the wealth you've already built internally, because that's real power, to enjoy wealth without needing to be loud about it. So if you've been caught in the loop chasing the next outfit, the next gadget, the next post that will prove something, pause, not to shame yourself, but to recalibrate. You are not here to impress the world, you are here to liberate yourself. And the moment you stop chasing applause and start chasing ownership, everything begins to shift. You stop leaking money, you stop leaking time, you stop leaking energy, and you begin building something that doesn't require approval, only alignment. Let today be the day you stop performing and start building. Let this chapter mark the end of trying to look rich and the beginning of quietly becoming unstoppable, because when wealth no longer needs to be seen, that's when it starts to grow. Chapter 13. Focus is a superpower. In a world that is louder, faster, and more overstimulated than ever before, there is one advantage more valuable than money, more rare than talent, more powerful than knowledge. It is focus, not shallow attention, not multitasking, not being busy, but deep, sustained, disciplined focus, the ability to direct your mind on one thing, long enough for it to transform into something meaningful, powerful, and real. Focus is not just a productivity tool. Focus is a form of wealth, because what you give your attention to multiplies, and what you starve dies. So if your life feels scattered, if your results feel shallow, if your mind is always in motion, but never at peace, this is not a failure of ability. This is a crisis of attention. And the wealth you seek will never arrive if your mind is too divided to receive it. The truth is simple but sobering. You cannot build wealth with a fragmented mind. You cannot create excellence in a state of distraction. You cannot step into power if your thoughts belong to 1,000 things that don't matter. Focus is not just about what you do. It's about what you refuse to do. It's about what you stop tolerating. It's about who you stop answering. It's about what you stop chasing so you can protect what's essential, because everything in your life is either sharpening your focus or breaking it. And most people lose not because they lacked opportunity, but because they gave their energy to too many low-value things for too many years, and then woke up wondering why nothing had changed. You see, your future isn't hidden in some faraway place. It's being built or destroyed by what you focus on today. Every choice you make is casting a vote for the life you will live. And those choices are determined by what you're paying attention to, what you're letting into your eyes, your ears, your calendar, your thoughts. And if your attention is constantly being hijacked by noise, by notifications, by drama, by comparison, by the endless need to be entertained, then your life will begin to reflect that chaos, not because you're lazy, but because you've never been taught to protect your mind like it's your most valuable asset, because it is. Think about this. Focus is the reason one person writes a best-selling book while another just talks about it for 10 years. Focus is the reason one entrepreneur builds $1 million business while another keeps working on something forever. Focus is the reason one investor compounds their capital while another panics every time the market shifts. It's not luck, it's not IQ, it's clarity, protected with boundaries. The ability to keep your attention aimed like a laser on what truly matters, while the rest of the world chases distractions like moths to a flame. And the people who win in the long run, they're not the ones who have more talent, they're the ones who can hold their attention longer than everyone else. But here's the truth most people never confront. Distraction is not an accident. It is a pattern, often rooted in fear. Because when you're afraid of failure, of success, of pressure, of judgment, of responsibility, your brain will seek escape. It will pull you into other people's lives. It will drown you in content. It will keep you chasing novelty so you don't have to face your own debt. Because building something real is hard. Finishing is hard. Staying with one thing long enough to make it great, terrifying. So your mind flinches, and you call it boredom. You say you're just curious. You say you're keeping your options open. But in reality, you're just avoiding the tension of mastery. And mastery only comes through focus. So how do you reclaim it? You begin by making it sacred. You treat your focus like a vault. You stop giving it away to people who haven't earned. You stop opening your day to chaos before your mind has a chance to anchor. You stop reacting to everything the moment it appears. You create space. You write before you scroll. You think before you click. You decide before the world decides for you. You realize that saying yes to everything is not generosity, it's self-abandonment. And that focus requires courage. The courage to ignore what doesn't serve your direction, no matter how loud, how urgent, how tempting it may seem. Let me be practical. Turn off your notifications. Block time on your calendar for real, uninterrupted work. Build routines that protect your mornings from noise. Use apps, not as entertainment, but as tools, with rules. Say no more often to people, to opportunities, to good ideas that pull you off your true path. And most importantly, learn to sit in silence. Because in silence, your mind begins to hear itself again. And from that clarity, your real ideas, the ones that could make you rich, will finally begin to surface. Focus is not a prison, it's liberation. It frees you from chasing 100 things that don't matter. It gives you the space to finally finish something, to see a result, to build momentum, to shift your identity, because identity is built through repetition, and repetition is only possible through focus. If you keep changing what you pursue, you'll never change who you are. But if you stay with one thing long enough to build it, that thing will begin to shape you. It will make you more disciplined, more resilient, more powerful, more calm, more wealthy, in every way. Let me ask you this. Where is your focus leaking? What is stealing your time, your energy, your attention, and giving you nothing in return? Where are you confusing motion with progress? Where are you confusing noise with importance? Because the world will not hand you clarity. You must carve. And every time you choose to focus, you are choosing to lead your life instead of just reacting to it. You are choosing ownership over chaos. And ownership, true quiet, unshakable ownership, is where wealth begins. So here is your power, right now. Choose one thing. Pour into. Refuse to flinch. Refuse to chase. Refuse to scatter. Protect your mind. Build your edge. Guard your energy like $1 billion asset. Because it is. Because if you can focus, truly, deeply, intentionally, you can build anything. Chapter 14. Money and the Ego. If wealth were only about numbers, most people would already be rich. Because money, in its rawest form, is simple. It moves in and out, follows rules, responds to systems. But the problem is, money doesn't just flow through accounts. It flows through people, and people are not simple. People are emotional. People are reactive. People are full of identity wounds, past conditioning, unconscious fears, and inner conflicts that never show up on spreadsheets, but always show up in their financial behavior. And at the heart of all of it is one thing: the ego. Not ego in the way most people think. Not just arrogance, not just pride, but ego as the inner structure that says, this is who I am, and this is what I need to protect. And for most people, that inner structure is fragile. And when ego is fragile, money becomes dangerous. Let's get something clear. Your ego isn't bad. It's part of being human. It's the voice inside you that creates consistency, the one that says, this is me, the one that protects your image and identity. But when left unchecked, the ego becomes obsessed, not with growth, not with wealth, but with protection. It wants to be right. It wants to look good. It wants to feel in control. And those three desires, rightness, image, control, will quietly destroy your ability to build wealth. Let's start with the first, the need to be right. So many people stay broke because they're more committed to their opinions than to the results they say they want. They'd rather argue than learn. They'd rather defend what they know than be humbled by what they don't. They'd rather hold on to beliefs that feel familiar than adopt strategies that actually work. This is the ego's addiction to certainty. It says, I know how the world works. I know what I'm worth. I know what's possible for me. And anything that challenges that, even if it's true, feels like a threat. So they push it away, they reject opportunity, they tune out truth, they stay stuck in patterns that feel safe, even if those patterns are financially toxic. Then comes the second piece, the obsession with image. This is where most people get trapped, because the ego wants to look successful, even if it isn't. It wants to be praised, even when it's performing. It wants to be admired, even when it's afraid. And so, people make money decisions, not based on strategy but based on status. They overspend to appear abundant. They take bad deals to maintain appearance. They lie, exaggerate, or hide to protect their pride, all because the ego whispers, if they see the truth, they'll stop respecting you. But the truth is, pretending is the most expensive thing you'll ever do. It costs you clarity, it costs you peace, and it costs you the very wealth you're trying to build, because you're using energy to perform, instead of to create. And then finally, control. The ego doesn't like risk, it doesn't like vulnerability, it doesn't like not knowing, so it clings, it micromanages, it panics when things shift, it freezes when the plan breaks. This is why so many people struggle to invest, to scale, to delegate, not because they lack knowledge, but because their ego can't handle uncertainty. And the problem is, uncertainty is where wealth lives. It lives in the decision you're not sure about. It lives in the room you feel underqualified to enter. It lives in the product you're scared to launch. It lives in the investment that stretches your comfort zone. It lives in the plan that might fail. But if your ego needs constant certainty to feel safe, you'll never move. You'll wait forever. You'll plan endlessly. You'll perfect things until they die in draft, because the ego would rather feel in control, even in poverty, than risk embarrassment for the sake of abundance. So what's the answer? You don't destroy the ego, you disarm it. You stop letting it drive the car. You stop letting it write your financial story. You stop letting it decide what you're allowed to have, try, build, or ask for. You start building a relationship with it, not as a dictator, but as a mirror, because the ego at its core is just trying to protect you. It's trying to keep you from reliving old pain, from feeling shame, from being rejected, from failing publicly, from being seen as small. But here's the truth. You're not small, you're just scared, and that's okay. But you can't build wealth from fear. You must build it from clarity, from courage, from alignment. And that means making peace with the parts of you that still feel unworthy, unready, or unqualified. Because here's the paradox. The ego says, once I get rich, I'll finally feel enough. But the truth is, you only build lasting wealth when you already feel enough before the money arrives. You build better when you're not performing. You invest smarter when you're not proving anything. You lead clearer when you don't need applause. You stop chasing, and you start building. You stop defending, and you start deciding. You stop posturing, and you start creating. Because wealth doesn't come to the loudest ego. It comes to the calmest mind. So here's the work. You begin noticing where your financial decisions are being driven by ego, not truth. You ask, am I making this move to feel superior? Or to grow? Am I avoiding this decision because I might be wrong? Am I scared to ask for help because it would make me look weak? Am I holding on to control because I don't trust that I'm safe in uncertainty? You name it, you feel it, you don't judge it, you just see it. And in that seeing you regain power, because when the ego is exposed it loses its grip. And when it loses its grip, you become free. And then free to try, free to fail, free to ask, free to build something that is yours, not a mask, free to chase wealth, because it's your calling, not because it's your proof. Because the person who gets rich is not the one who wins every battle, it's the one who no longer needs to fight themselves. Let this be the moment where you stop hiding behind your image, where you stop fearing failure like it's fate, where you stop arguing to be right, and start moving to be free. You are not your ego, you are not your past, you are not your performance. You are the architect of your future, and the quieter your ego becomes, the louder your results will speak. Chapter 15. The Habit Loop of Millionaires. Success is not a lightning strike. It is not a single event. A viral moment, a one-time decision that changes everything. Success is a pattern. It is rhythm. It is the invisible structure of your days, repeated until it builds a life. And wealth. Wealth is simply the byproduct of habits compounded over time. It's not who you know. It's not even what you do occasionally. It's what you do consistently, even when no one's watching, even when motivation disappears, even when the world is asleep, and you're still planting seeds in the dark. Millionaires don't become millionaires because of talent. They become millionaires because they shape their identity around a certain kind of habit loop, and then they repeat that loop until wealth becomes inevitable. Here's what most people misunderstand. They think millionaires must be superhuman, waking up at 4 a.m., crushing 18-hour days, multitasking to the point of burnout. But that's not the truth. The truth is they're just relentlessly consistent in the small things. They aren't smarter, they aren't more creative. They just stopped negotiating with themselves. They wake up and do the thing, whether they feel like it or not. They manage their attention, not just their time. They audit their energy. They protect their mornings. They reflect, refine, reset. While the average person is chasing a new idea every week, they're refining the same systems every day. While the average person is motivated only when it's easy, they're committed even when it's boring. That's the real difference. It's not firework, it's friction, applied consistently, until it burns a new identity into place. Let's break down the habit loop that millionaires unconsciously install. It always begins with a cue, a trigger that starts the behavior, followed by the routine, the action itself, and then ends with a reward, the reason the brain keeps coming back. Most people live with default cues: wake up tired, check phone, scroll social media, waste 90 minutes before the day even begins. The reward: dopamine, comfort, avoidance of discomfort. But millionaires design their cues. They don't start the day reacting. They start the day anchoring. Maybe it's a quiet room and a journal. Maybe it's movement. Maybe it's reviewing goals. Maybe it's 15 minutes of focused silence before opening a single app. Whatever it is, it's intention. It's designed to tell the mind, this day belongs to you. And from that cue they drop into routines, systems that eliminate the need for decision fatigue. They don't ask themselves if they should work on the business today. They already decide. They don't ask if they should eat clean, review their numbers, reach out to clients, or reflect on performance. They've built rituals so powerful they no longer need willpower, because the decision is already made. Then comes the reward, and this is where most people misunderstand motivation. The average person waits for external rewards, applause, income, praise, results. But millionaires build internal rewards. They train themselves to feel satisfaction from the act of discipline itself, from showing up when it was hard, from doing what they said they would, from living in alignment, not performance. And because they don't need constant external feedback, they can keep moving forward even when results are delayed. They can work through dry season. They can hold steady when the metrics don't look good yet. They can build through doubt, because the reward is not just the result. It's the identity shift happening inside. You must understand this. Wealth doesn't come from what you do once. It comes from what you automate. It comes from making the hard choice once, and then making it again until it becomes who you are. Because identity is not built in a moment, it's forged in repetition. And millionaires build their identity around their habits, not their hopes. They don't just say, I want to be rich. They say, I'm the kind of person who tracks my numbers daily. I'm the kind of person who prioritizes deep work. I'm the kind of person who learns one new financial insight every day. I'm the kind of person who follows through on what I said I'd do, even if I'm tired. That's how wealth begins to stick, not with excitement, but with evidence. Now ask yourself honestly, but what are your current habit loops? What do your mornings actually look like? What are you reinforcing every day without realizing? Are you building identity around growth, or around distraction? Around ownership, or around avoidance? Because every action is a vote for who you are becoming. And if you're casting votes all day for chaos, confusion, comfort, and distraction, then it doesn't matter what you want. You will never outdream your daily loops. The beautiful part, you don't need to change everything at once. You just need to change one loop, one tiny behavior, repeated consistently, protected like a treasure. You make it simple. You make it automatic. You build confidence from completion, not perfection. Start by choosing one millionaire habit, not flashy, not sexy, but fundamental, tracking your spending daily, waking up without touching your phone, writing down your 3 priorities before checking email, reviewing your numbers every Friday, reading 10 pages of a wealth-related book each morning, creating before consuming, practicing strategic gratitude for what you've built so far, not fake positivity, but real ownership. And then you do it, every day, without negotiation, not because you feel like it, because this is who you are now. Here's the truth. Millionaire habits feel small in the moment. They don't look like wealth. They don't feel like magic, but they are the roots. And roots grow slowly, silently, underground, until one day you realize you're no longer thinking about tracking. You just do it. You're no longer battling resistance. You just begin. You're no longer chasing identity. You've become the person you said you'd be. And from that place, wealth becomes predictable, because your habits are now aligned with your future. And alignment, not hustle, is what multiplies your power. Let me say this clearly. You don't need more motivation. You need better habits. You don't need a better goal. You need a better loop. Because the future is not something you wait for. It's something you loop into your present, until it becomes reality. And the person who builds quietly, consistently, unshakably, becomes unstoppable. Chapter 16. The belief that you are too late. There is a lie that destroys more dreams than failure ever could. A quiet, corrosive thought that seeps into your ambition and whispers, "You've missed your chance." It sounds like logic. It feels like wisdom, but it is pure self-sabotage. The lie is this: it's too late for me. Too late to start over. Too late to build wealth. Too late to change direction. Too late to become someone new. Too late to win. And it doesn't matter if you're 25 or 65. The thought still visits, because somewhere in your mind, you've internalized a clock that isn't real, a timeline set by other people's pace, a false expiration date, a belief that success belongs only to those who figured it out earlier. But that's not truth. That's fear, dressed in logic. And if you let it sit in your mind unchallenged, it will shrink your entire future into a coffin of regrets that didn't have to exist. Let's be honest, maybe you didn't start when you should have. Maybe you wasted time. Maybe you were distracted. Maybe you were scared, stuck, confused, or surviving. Maybe you messed it up before. Fine. But here's what matters now. You're still here, still breathing, still capable, still being given the chance, right now, to become someone who moves. And that means it's not too late. It's only too late when you decide to surrender your story to that excuse. Because time doesn't care when you start. Time cares that you start, and that you stay. The world wants you to believe that wealth has an age limit, that if you're not rich by 30 you failed, that if you're not ahead by 40 you're behind, that if you don't have a certain life by a certain year, you're disqualified. But let's be real, whose timeline are you following? Whose definition of too late did you absorb? Whose pace are you comparing yourself to? You don't need to move faster. You need to move aligned. You need to stop racing towards someone else's finish line and start walking toward your own beginning. And beginnings don't care how long you waited. They only care that you finally showed up. Do you know what most people do when they feel behind? They freeze. They drown in guilt. They overthink every step. They tell themselves they should have started sooner, and then use that regret as a reason not to start at all. But regret is not a reason to stop. Regret is a signal that something wants to live. Something in you still believes it's possible. And that belief, that flicker of desire, is your proof that time hasn't won yet. You have power left. You have moves to make. You have time, not infinite, but enough. Enough to become, enough to build, enough to rise. Let me give you truth that doesn't sell headlines but sets people free. Most people don't get rich fast. They get rich later than they expected. They get rich after trying other things that didn't work. They get rich after rebuilding their habits, their mindset, their strategy. They get rich after deciding that being late was better than staying stuck. You are not disqualified. You are being summoned, not to rush, but to take back the years by refusing to waste one more minute believing you can't change now. Though wealth doesn't reward speed, it rewards consistency, it rewards clarity, it rewards the person who starts, stumbles, learns, and then doesn't stop, no matter how late they feel, because the timeline doesn't belong to the world, it belongs to you, and when you own it, you stop waiting for permission. You stop comparing your path to people you've never met. You stop measuring your life against Instagram highlight reel. You stop saying it's too late and start saying I'm right on time because I'm finally awake. So what if you started now, not with shame, not with pressure, but with ownership? What if you accepted the past without letting it define your future? What if you said, yes, I waited too long, but now I move? That moment would become the pivot point, the moment the clock stopped counting against you and started counting for you, because when you act from alignment, time begins to stretch. You accomplish in months what you used to postpone for years. You meet people, ideas, breakthroughs that you weren't ready for before. You move with energy that wasn't accessible back then, not because life got easier, but because you stopped telling yourself it had to be earlier to be real. I'll tell you something strange about the psychology of wealth. The people who start later often end up more grounded, more effective, and more unstoppable, because they've already seen what wasting time costs. They've lived with the pain of playing small. They've survived self-betrayal. They've lost things. And now, they've decided to do it differently, not out of panic, but out of peace. Not because they're behind, but because they've finally aligned with who they really are. That kind of wealth, it moves deeper, it lasts longer, it transcends timeline. If you're listening to this chapter right now, and something in you aches, if you're wondering if you waited too long, missed your shot, blew your chance, let me tell you this clearly, you didn't. You are right where your next chapter needs you to be. You are not too old, you are not too far gone, you are not too late. You are standing at the edge of the life you were meant to build, and all that's required is that you step forward, today, not with guilt, but with resolve. You don't have to move fast, you just have to move now. So here is your call to action. Choose one thing you've been avoiding because you thought it was too late. Do it now. Start, rebuild, relearn, reclaim. Do not let time shame you out of transformation. Because what matters most is not when you begin, it's that you don't leave the rest of your life on hold, just because the beginning took longer than expected. Let the world keep measuring time by fear. You will measure it by purpose, and purpose, real purpose, is never late. It only asks that you say yes. Chapter 17, The Power of Saying No. In a culture that glorifies more hustle, more content, more meetings, more visibility, more opportunity, we have quietly lost touch with one of the most powerful forces in the psychology of wealth. The word no, not the angry, reactive no, not the petty no that's born of fear or pride, but the clean, grounded, strategic no that separates those who stay stuck from those who create freedom. Because wealth is not built by adding more, it's built by removing what doesn't matter. The average person says yes too often. Yes to obligations they don't believe in. Yes to distractions that steal their time. Yes to opportunities that lead them nowhere. Yes to relationships that drain their energy. Yes to projects that don't align. Yes because they're afraid of conflict. Yes because they crave approval. Yes because they mistake busyness for significance. But millionaires, real ones, understand this. Every yes is a contract, and every contract comes at a cost. When you say yes to something, you are saying no to something else. Often, something far more important. And those hidden costs, they compound. They dilute your focus. They clutter your calendar. They confuse your mission. And eventually, they drain your power. If you want to build wealth, you must fall in love with boundaries. Not because you're cold, but because you are clear. Clarity is what allows you to say no, not emotionally, but decisively. No to the event that doesn't align. No to the deal that doesn't fit. No to the person who doesn't respect your time. No to the urgent thing that distracts you from the essential, not because you're better, but because you're committed. Because saying no isn't rejection, it's protection. It's you choosing your future over your fears. It's you choosing focus over flattery. It's you choosing mission over maintenance. Let's be honest, how much of your life right now feels full, but not fruitful? How much of your calendar is spent reacting, not creating? How many hours do you give away because you're too afraid to disappoint? You're not tired because you're weak. You're tired because you're overloaded with non-essential yeses. You don't lack discipline. You lack boundaries. You don't lack time. You lack priority. And when everything is allowed in, nothing powerful gets built. Because power comes from focus, and focus comes from saying no, over and over, until the only things left in your life are the things that move you forward. You need to remember this. Saying no is not about rejection. It's about resource allocation. Your energy is a resource. Your attention is a resource. Your time is your most precious, non-renewable currency. And the rich, they guard those currencies like treasure. They are ruthlessly intentional about what they let in. They aren't everywhere. They aren't everything to everyone. They aren't constantly explaining themselves. They just decide and move. That's not arrogance. That's alignment. Of course, saying no will upset people. You will disappoint friends. You will offend acquaintances. You will confuse strangers. You will be misunderstood. But wealth doesn't require universal approval. It requires courageous filtration. You are not here to be liked by everyone. You are here to build something that lasts. And that means there will be moments when you choose your path over popularity. And that's okay, because every time you say yes to someone else's expectations at the cost of your own calling, you fracture yourself. And fractured people do not build empires. Here's what you can do, starting now. Audit your current yeses. Look at every commitment, every collaboration, every ongoing conversation. Ask, is this aligned with my mission? Does this move me forward, or just keep me busy? Am I doing this from truth, or from fear of what people will think if I decline? If it doesn't serve your future, it's stealing from it. Be honest. Be surgical. Be unashamed. You are allowed to release what no longer serves you. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to decline. You are allowed to change your mind. No is not failure. No is maturity. No is the shield that protects your yes from being meaningless. They say, because when you learn how to say no well, your yes becomes sacred. Your yes becomes powerful. Your yes becomes your word, your signature, your vow. Your yes means something, because it's not given light, and people respect that more than they respect a yes that comes from obligation or insecurity. Real wealth is quiet, clear, calm, and the person who walks in that clarity, they are not easily swayed. They listen deeply, choose wisely, and move intentionally. They say no without guilt, and yes without doubt. That's the energy of someone who knows where they're going and refuses to be pulled away by anything less. So, if you've been stretched too thin, if you feel like your energy is leaking, if you've been stuck in loops of pleasing, proving, or performing, this is your moment to pull back, to simplify, to eliminate, to honor your time, to protect your attention, to stop apologizing for having a vision that not everyone understands, because in the silence left by your no, your next level has room to arrive. This chapter is not about becoming selfish. It's about becoming responsible with your attention, your energy, your mission, and your future. It's about remembering that you weren't sent here to do everything. You were sent here to do what only you can do, and doing that well requires one of the most mature, high-value, millionaire-level skills on earth, the ability to say no, and mean it. Chapter 18. What you tolerate, you train. There is a silent force that shapes your financial life more than any strategy, skill, or system. It's not your income, it's not your education, it's not your network, it's what you allow. Because, over time, you do not just live with what you tolerate. You begin to train it into permanence. Every time you let something persist that you know isn't right, every time you bite your tongue when something violates your standards, every time you lower your expectations just to keep the peace, you are not just surviving it, You are signaling to yourself and others, this is acceptable, this is normal, this is who I am. And once something becomes normal, it becomes identity, and once it becomes identity, it becomes destiny. Let's say this clearly, your life right now is a reflection of what you've tolerated, not just from others but from yourself. Tolerated procrastination, tolerated unclear boundaries, tolerated distractions, tolerated underpricing, tolerated toxic relationships, tolerated small thinking, tolerated disrespect from clients, colleagues, or even your own inner voice, and you didn't tolerate it because you're weak. You tolerated it because it was easier than conflict, easier than confrontation, easier than admitting that your standards needed to rise. But the cost of ease is always expensive in the long run, because what you tolerate slowly eats your time, your energy, your confidence, and eventually your wealth. You train people how to treat you, you train yourself how serious you are, and you train your life to mirror your standards. If you accept chaos, your life will stay chaotic. If you accept low standards, your opportunities will match them. If you accept disrespect, you'll find yourself surrounded by it. This isn't karma. This isn't mysticism. This is neural reinforcement. You show your brain what matters by what you permit, and your brain builds identity around the patterns it sees repeated without consequence. That's why change doesn't begin with new habits. It begins with a new standard, a standard that says, I no longer tolerate this is beneath the life I'm building. This is not the story I'm here to live. And then action follows that declaration. But here's where most people get stuck. They think raising standards means changing everything overnight. It doesn't. Raising standards is often quiet. It's a small refusal, a boundary held, a conversation you've been avoiding, finally had, a late-night binge avoided, a new expectation set, not out of anger but out of alignment. And then you reinforce it, not just once but consistently, until it becomes your new normal. Because wealth isn't built from intensity, it's built from repetition of integrity, doing the hard thing enough times that it becomes the default. And once it becomes your default, wealth flows through it naturally. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Every time you let something slide, you pay for it later with interest. That client who keeps missing payments, that employee who shows up late every week, that friend who only calls when they need something, that inner voice that tells you it's okay to break your word to yourself. None of those things are neutral. They are quietly forming the atmosphere of your life. They are shaping the container that holds your potential. And if that container is built from tolerance instead of truth, it will crack the moment real growth tries to pour in. Wealthy people are not just rich in money, they are rich in standards. They don't beg for alignment, they expect it. They don't force relationships, they filter them. They don't tolerate delay, disorder, or disrespect, because they know everything they allow becomes part of the ecosystem they're building. It's not about being harsh, it's about being honest, because the wealth you're building isn't just financial, it's emotional clarity, it's energetic cleanliness, it's psychological congruence, and that can't coexist with chronic tolerance of things that drain you. So what do? You take inventory. Ask yourself, what am I currently tolerating that I know is beneath my potential? Where have I lowered my standards to keep the peace? What patterns am I silently reinforcing through inaction? What self-neglect have I normalized as part of my identity? And when you find those answers, you don't judge them, you elevate them. You start raising the floor, not chasing perfection, just refusing to sink any lower than the person you've decided to become. And then you make that identity non-negotiable. From this point on, you must walk with the understanding that, and your next level will not arrive until your current life becomes too aligned, too focused, too high frequency for mediocrity to survive in it. You're not being punished when things fall away as you grow. You're being cleared of tolerances, cleared of distraction, cleared of agreements you never should have made, cleared of a life that was too small for the wealth you're ready to hold. Wealth is not just about what you gain, it's about what you no longer settle for. Because the richest person in the room isn't always the one with the biggest bank account. It's the one with the clearest standards, the most protected energy, the most self-honoring boundaries, the most aligned environment, the one who walks away when something no longer fits, the one who says, not anymore, and means it. That person, they're not just rich, they're free, they're this. Let this be your pivot. Let this be the moment you say, I no longer tolerate chaos. I no longer tolerate confusion. I no longer tolerate poor treatment from others or myself. I no longer tolerate self-sabotage in the name of politeness. I no longer tolerate comfort that costs me my calling, because the wealth you seek is waiting for a life clean enough to hold it, and that life begins the moment you stop allowing what doesn't belong. Chapter 19. Your financial ceiling is a mirror. There comes a moment on the journey to wealth when you realize that your biggest obstacle isn't external. It's not the economy, it's not your competition, it's not your upbringing, and it's not your lack of information. It's you. More specifically, it's the version of you that you've been unwilling to confront. Because the truth is, and you may feel this deep in your chest even as you hear it, you are already operating at the level you believe you deserve. Not consciously, but subconsciously, silently, automatically. You are earning, keeping, and allowing exactly what your inner thermostat is set to. And that thermostat isn't just about money, it's about identity, it's about what you believe you're worthy of. It's about how much success, freedom, peace, and power you feel safe holding, not just wanting but holding. Imagine it like this. Your financial ceiling is not made of concrete, it's made of glass. You can see what's above it. You want what's above it. You can even touch it at times. But something always pulls you back down, and you tell yourself stories. I need more skills. I need better luck. I need a new strategy. But most of the time you don't need more strategy. You need more self-permission, because your current income is not the ceiling of your potential. It is the ceiling of your internal permission. The amount of wealth you feel allowed to receive without guilt. The amount of success you feel able to hold without self-sabotage. The amount of visibility you can handle without hiding. The amount of leadership you can embody without feeling like a fraud. You don't hit the ceiling because you're incapable. You hit it because somewhere deep inside, that's where your identity told you to stop. We've all seen it happen. Someone reaches a new level of success, and then quickly loses it. They get the opportunity, and sabotage it. They double their income, and triple their spending. They finally feel momentum, and suddenly get too busy to continue. Because their internal world didn't expand fast enough to hold the external reward. They reached beyond their mirror, but the reflection never changed. So they snapped back. This is called upper limiting, and it's not weakness. It's a nervous system defense. Your body and mind are designed to protect you, and when something feels unfamiliar, even if it's good, it triggers alarms. And when those alarms go off, you unconsciously retreat to the last version of yourself that felt safe. So the real work, it's not just chasing the next level, it's building the internal structure to support it when it arrives. That means healing the parts of you that believe wealth makes you a bad person, releasing the guilt that says you have to suffer to deserve abundance, letting go of the fear that success means isolation or judgment, confronting the beliefs that were handed to you by parents, school, society, beliefs that never belonged to you, because your ceiling is a mirror of your unresolved internal stories. And until those stories are rewritten, no amount of strategy will save you from your own subconscious ceiling. Take a moment and ask yourself, what income level feels safe to you? What kind of lifestyle feels permissible before guilt kicks in? At what level of success do you begin to fear judgment, loss, or pressure? Who told you money was dangerous, or greedy, or selfish? What patterns do you repeat right when you're about to break through? These questions are not small. They are the keys to your internal thermostat. And once you see the pattern, you can reprogram the system. Not overnight, not instantly, but steadily, with awareness, ownership, and emotional rewiring. You begin telling yourself a different truth. I am safe to expand. I am allowed to outgrow old limits. I am worthy of receiving without guilt. I do not owe struggle to anyone. As proof of my value, I can hold more without losing myself. And then you reinforce that belief by living like it's true, even before it fully feels true. Because action is the language of identity. You don't wait until you believe it. You move until you believe it. You build evidence until your nervous system catches up. You act like the ceiling doesn't exist. And eventually, it doesn't. Person this clearly. The gas ceiling. Understand this clearly. The glass ceiling is not broken by willpower. It's dissolved by identity shifts. You stop playing small. You stop downplaying your goals to make others comfortable. You stop apologizing for wanting more. You stop making decisions through the lens of guilt, fear, or outdated stories. You choose. You expand. You walk in rooms you once disqualified yourself from. You speak with clarity you once didn't believe you had. You make moves your old self couldn't comprehend, not because you're reckless, but because you're now free. The person you need to become is not out there. They're already inside you, buried beneath years of conditioning, fear, and false humility. And every time you shatter a limiting belief, that version steps closer. Every time you say no to the familiar chaos, and yes to aligned order, you become every time you refuse to repeat a pattern, a script, a sabotage, you prove that your ceiling is no longer the boss of your future. And the mirror, it begins to change. It reflects back a different you, one that is not afraid to hold power, one that no longer fears being seen, one that trusts themselves to rise, receive, and retain wealth, not as an act of desperation, but as a state of being. This is your next level of wealth, not just more money, but more capacity, more emotional space, more identity alignment, more congruence between who you say you are and what you allow yourself to hold. Because the ceiling was never outside of you, it was always the internal permission slip you were waiting to sign. And now, you don't need anyone's signature but your own. Chapter 20. The final upgrade. Becoming the kind of person money stays with. This is where everything changes. Because by now, you've realized the truth. Getting rich is not the hard part. Becoming the person who can hold wealth, that's the work. Anyone can make money once. Anyone can catch a lucky break, close a big deal, ride a trend, inherit a sum, or strike gold in the market. But if they haven't become the kind of person money stays with, it slips through their fingers like water through a broken vessel. They get rich, then they crash. They build, then they burn out. They rise, then they sabotage. Because the foundation was never built to hold the weight of the reward. So this final chapter is not about more hustle, more ideas, or more hacks. It is about the final upgrade, the shift from chasing wealth to embodying the kind of person it naturally gravitates to, stays with, and multiplies through. Let's strip it all down. You've learnt about beliefs, patterns, emotional set points, boundaries, tolerance, focus, self-permission, and discipline. But here's the real question that matters now. Are you becoming the kind of person who can hold wealth without losing yourself? Not just hold it for a year, but for decades, through seasons, through pressure, through growth. Because wealth is not just about money, it's about capacity, and capacity doesn't come from information, it comes from identity. So ask yourself, who are you when no one's watching? Who are you when the pressure is high? Who are you when there's abundance? Do you stay grounded? Do you stay disciplined? Do you lead with principle, not panic? Or do you still operate from the same emotional volatility that created your old limitation? If you want to build lasting wealth, then this is the final upgrade. You must become someone who money trusts. Yes, money trusts. Because wealth is not just earned, it is invited. It is sustained by how you treat it. It is magnetized by how you manage it. It is multiplied by how you move with it. Not from fear, not from ego, but from conviction and clarity. Here is what that kind of person looks like. They don't chase, they attract. They don't hoard, they steward. They don't react, they respond. They don't collapse when seasons change. They adapt with wisdom. They don't spend to impress, they invest to expand. They don't burn out to prove. They protect their energy as a sacred asset. They don't panic during downturns. They lean on systems they've built in peace. They live with principles. They lead with vision. They build slow, deep roots, not just tall branches. And because of that, when the storms come, they do not fall. They hold, they preserve, they multiply, and money stays with them because it feels safe there. This doesn't mean they're perfect. It means they've built integrity, not just ethical integrity, but energetic and psychological integrity. Their inner world can support the size of their external one. They don't grow wealth just for show. They grow it to support impact, freedom, and future generations. Their character isn't cracked by success, it's refined by it. Let's go even deeper. The kind of person money stays with is unshakably honest, because they understand that lies are always expensive, boundaried, because they know that saying no is what protects the real yes, responsible, not just for money, but for mission, humble, not falsely modest, but grounded enough to stay curious, audited, regularly checking their motives, emotions and stewardship, peaceful, not because life is easy, but because their identity is no longer at war. This is not sexy, this is not viral, but this is real wealth, wealth of spirit, wealth of mind, wealth of capacity, and this is what makes money stay. Now here is the question you must carry beyond this book. Am I becoming the kind of person who creates environments, mentally, emotionally, relationally, where wealth feels welcome and safe? Because wealth is not kept by force, it's kept by resonance. It stays with who matches it. So if you still operate from scarcity, chaos, or avoidance, it will sense the misalignment. It will leave, not as punishment, but as a teacher, inviting you to go deeper, to build again, to stretch further, to become stronger, to evolve. So how do you begin the final upgrade? Not by trying harder, but by becoming more honest. Start by identifying where your current wealth container is cracked. Are you leaking money through unaligned habit? Are you giving away your time and attention to distractions? Are you holding resentment, guilt, or shame around money? Are you still afraid of judgment or visibility when wealth increases? Are you still spending in ways that seek validation instead of value? Then fix the crack gently, patiently, deliberately, not to chase a perfect life, but to build a strong one, one that holds wealth, without trauma, without panic, without drama, just flow, structure, and truth. The truth is this: money is not the finish line. Money is the amplifier. It reveals who you are. It expands what you already believe. It magnifies how you treat yourself and others. So when you become the kind of person money stays with, the goal is no longer the cash. The goal becomes alignment, clarity, peace, stewardship, freedom. You don't just build wealth, you become wealth, not in ego, but in energy, not in show, but in stillness, not to impress, but to lead. You're not chasing money anymore, you're chasing mastery of self, of standards, of vision, and from that mastery, money will never be a mystery again. It will be a mirror of who you've become, a reflection of the person who finally stopped hustling for approval, performing for success, or fearing their own expansion, and started living as the version of themselves that wealth can trust and stay with. This is your final invitation. Don't just finish this book. Re-listen, reintegrate, recommit, because the psychology of getting rich is not a chapter you read, it is a reality you live, and now it belongs to you.